we are cold and dark at Oliver Tambo, and we're checking that the weather radar is off, the engine mode selected to normal and the engine masters are off, the speed brake's not on, the flaps are retracted, and that the transponder is off. The landing gear is down, the brake pressure is in the green, and then we'll go upstairs, check that the wipers are both off. We don't want to scratch the windscreen, and the first officer will be outside doing his walk around. Let's turn on both batteries and check that the voltage is 25.5 or greater. Then we'll turn on the external power. And we'll go across to the right hand panel, check the crew oxygen is on, check that the voice recorder is working. Then we'll turn on the ADIRS, number 1, number 2 and then number 3. Then we'll go across to the center panel, turn on the nav logo lights to tell ground crew we're in the cockpit. Seatbelt signs on, no smoking signs on, emergency lights armed. The probe heat is off and the cabin pressure is on auto. Set the cabin temperature as required depending on the weather at the time. Check the battery voltage and turn on all 6 of the fuel pumps. A panel with no white lights is a good panel. We'll then go and we'll do the fire test on the engines and on the APU. And once that is done, we'll be able to start the APU. Turn on the APU master and then wait 3 seconds and you can start the APU. The left hand panel is a maintenance panel but is largely inoperative in the sim. At this point we can turn up the brightness of the PFD and the ND and then move across to the glare shield, turn up that brightness, and then onto the pedestal and turn on the ECAM brightness. Let's go up to the EFIS where we can set the baro to hectopascals and we'll set the QNH. We'll put the flight director on both sides. We'll have the nav in arc mode, usually at 10 to 20 nautical miles. Speed, heading and altitude are all in managed mode, bold and dash. We'll set the appropriate altitude, and in our case there are no restrictions and we can go straight up to our cruise level, flight level 350. There is a VOR at our departure airport, so we'll switch that on as extra insurance. Because I'm linked to SimBrief, we can get the weather from the FMC, MACDO, ATSU, AOC, and then go weather request and type in your departure airport and your arrival airport and then press send. A few minutes later, MACDO, ATSU, AOC and received message, and then your META will have arrived. You will be told on the ECAM when it's arrived, and then you can look at it on the screen, and in fact you can print it. Push print, go down to the printer which is on the pedestal, and then you can pick up the piece of paper and put it on your pedestal so that you can easily view it. And you can see here there's no significant weather. There's no wind. The QNH is 1030 and there are very few clouds, so all is good. What I'm going to do now is make sure that my FMC is connected to SimBrief. So go do options, SimBrief, and there's my username, my pilot ID. So that means that I am connected to SimBrief. So let's pull in the data from SimBrief, which is open with a flight plan. Go do ATSU, AOC, init press, and then request the data. And you can see it will pull in my departure and arrival airport and other information. So before we do anything else, let's load the fuel. do ATSU, AOC, and then performance, weight and balance. So click on that and check the block fuel, taxi fuel and trip fuel against your flight plan, and in this case it's correct. That's what my flight plan shows. So click load. Then go on to the next page and look at the payload and check that the payload is matches what is in your flight plan, and make a note of your 0 fuel weight, which is 59.1 tons, and your 0 fuel weight center of gravity, which is 30. Number of packs is 174. And again click load to load that. Let's set up the FMC using diffsrib, the famous Airbus mnemonic. Data, aircraft status, check that the AIRAC is up to date, and check that we're sitting in the correct aircraft with the right engines. Under data, we can also check our GPS position. We go data, monitor the GPS, click on one of the RSs and have a look at the GPS readings and compare that with the GPS readings on your gate number at your airport, which you'll find in your Navigraph maps. I is for init A, push the init button, and let's request that we pull in all that information from SimBrief, and you can see it gets populated with the airports, the alternate, the flight number, the cost index, the cruise height and the temperature. Under flight number you'll see BA221, but that's actually our call sign, and that's what ATC will see. So let's change it to our actual call sign, which is Speedbird 320. F is for flight plan, so hit flight plan and let's check that that has been imported. It should have all the waypoints excepting the SIDS and stars and the ILS, which we have to put in separately. So let's do that. FAOR, departure, and then we're going to take off from 3L, and then our SID is going to be the actor 1B. And there's going to be no transition. So let's insert that. Let's go to the arrival airport and insert the ILS runway and the star that we're going to use. We're going to use the ILS 6Z, and always use Z unless you're told to use Y or one of the others by air traffic control. According to our flight plan, we're going to use the Gito 1C star, and there's going to be no transition. So let's put that in and then push insert, and then our flight plan is complete. So let's put the ND into plan mode, and then using the up arrow scroll through the route just to make sure that it makes sense and there's no discontinuities or anything unusual. The S is for secondary flight plan, which is not modeled in the sim yet, and you would use that if you wanted to put in the flight plan to the alternate airport or any other backup flight plan. R is for RadNav, where our ILS frequency is already in. The course should also be in. I think that's a bug in the sim. You can put in a VOR. I'm going to put in the VOR at Oliver Tambo, just as a backup in case we have to return to the airport. The second I is for init B. Press init, scroll across to the second page, and then you need to fill in your zero fuel weight and center of gravity. Seems to be a shortcut now where you just double click it and it kind of puts it in for you. But if you don't know the center of gravity, you can go into Microsoft Flight Simulator, the fuel page, and the center of gravity will be there. The fuel is in pounds, so I prefer to use SimBrief for the fuel. According to the flight plan, we have a tailwind of 5 knots, so let's put that in. And it's worth noting that our takeoff weight is 65.1 tons and our maximum landing weight is 66 tons, so we could land straight away. Here's for performance. Enter the transition altitude. The thrust reduction and acceleration height is 1,500 feet above the aerodrome. Let's put in our flaps 1. We don't have to put in the THS, the trimmable horizontal stabilizer, and we can calculate a flex temp to derate the engines. In our case it was 40 degrees centigrade. Then push next to V1, VR and V2, and our values will be given. Take them down, but they should appear on the PFD. And here you can see them on the PFD. In magenta is the V2 and in blue is the V rotate. If you want to know how to calculate trim in the Airbus, download this A320X trim calculator. You enter the center of gravity, which in this case is 29.8. Click calculate, and it gives us our trim, which is 0.3 down. Just very quickly, the way I calculated the flex temp was to download this app, A320 Takeoff Performance Calculator. You fill in the origin airport, the temperature, the wind, and various other things, all self-explanatory here, and then you click calculate, and it came up with a flex temperature of 40 degrees. Okay, it's time to start up and push back, but before we do that, this is the EasyJet checklist. They have 320 Airbuses, so they should know what they're doing. The cockpit has been prepared, the signs are on, the ADIRS are line, we've checked the fuel quantity, the flight management guidance system has been set, altimeter set and cross-checked, windows and doors closed, beacon lights are on. We don't have a mobile phone in our Airbus. Parking brake is on. Okay, let's assume we've done our departure briefing, which would include threats, which may be NOTAMs, weather, wind, ice on the runway, minimum safe altitude, engine out procedures. We'll check our takeoff weight against our maximum landing weight and so on. I have ground clearance, so I'm going to use pushback helper to call the tug, engine selector to ignition, and I'm going to start engine 2. Once the tug is connected, I can release the parking brakes and move forward onto the taxiway. Pushback Helper is a very simple free app that you can download from flightsim.2 and makes getting onto the taxiway very easy. It seems like today they've sent us an invisible tug, but it seems to be doing the job anyway. So as the first engine spools up to 19.5%, I will start the second engine, and when we get to the point we want to be, we will put on the parking brake and send the tug away. While I'm down here, I will set the flaps to 1. I will arm the speed brakes, check that the rudder trim is on 0. Once I'm on the taxiway and the parking brake is on, I can get rid of the tug. The engines have spooled up and are functional, so I can now switch off the APU. We previously worked out that the pitch trim is 0.3 down, so let's set that now, and then we can check it on the ECAM under flight controls. And while we're there, let's do an ECAM status check, and then we can do the after start checklist. Anti-ice off, ECAM status done, pitch trim set, rudder trim to 0. When we are taxiing, we try and keep the ground speed under 10 knots when we turn in corners, and on the straight we taxi at about 20 knots, and the speed limit is 30 knots. Don't go above 30 knots. When you have 2 pilots, the next lot of procedures can usually be done on the fly, or if you're waiting in a queue, but because we are single pilot, we are going to stop and do the procedures. Let's check the FMC takeoff data, check that the auto brakes are set max, and let's check the flight controls, the primary flight controls, the ailerons, the elevators and the rudder. We do a full left, full right, neutral for each of them. Check that the takeoff config on the upper ECAM is all green. Let's check on the PFD that V1 is blue and V2 is magenta, and we'll check the FCU is set properly. We're going to do a PAX off takeoff, and all our lights are going to be put to the on position. Anti-ice and probe heat depends on the weather. We're going to have them off. On the lower pedestal, set the weather radar, make sure that the squawk code is set, and put the transponder to TARA. So we have takeoff clearance. Let's do the before takeoff checklist. Flight controls checked, briefing confirmed, flap setting 0.3 down, FMA and takeoff data red, transponder set, ECAM MEMO takeoff no blue, EFB checked, cabin secured for takeoff, engine mode selector on normal, TCAS TARA, packs are off and anti-ice is off. So as we taxi on to runway 3L at Oliver Tambo, I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we're going to take off and fly to Durban and do an ILS landing. So thanks for watching and goodbye.